All right, hello. This will be the guide for the 2024 district test, mathematics test. I'll be going over all the questions on the test and trying to explain the reasoning behind them to the best of my abilities. Without a further ado, let's begin. Okay, Tommy took Talina to Trail Dust for her birthday, ordered a fillet for $23.99 and iced tea for $2.15, and then ribeye for $26.99 and another iced tea for $2.15. They also shared chocolate cake for $6.99. Tax rate is 1.08125. And Tommy paid with four $20 bills and told the waitress to keep the change as tip. How much was her tip? Well, you start off with $80 and then you have to subtract everything they paid. You have the original cost plus the tax rate, so 1.08125 times the entire cost, which is just going to be all this stuff added together, and you get 12.67. Coach Hood persuaded the Canadian Education Foundation to purchase some new calculators for the high school and middle school UIL teams. Swiss DM calculator cost $249, and a Prime calculator cost $144.99. They got a total of 40 calculators at a cost of $8,087.82. How many Swiss DM32 calculators did they purchase? Well, this is a systems of equations. The number of Swiss and Prime calculators combined is 40, and multiplying those numbers by their price, that's a net cost of $8,087.82. So you'll put this into your matrix, a 2 by 3, and then use RF, which is basically saying solve a systems of equation. RF, and then for math, scroll up till you get to RF, and then put in the matrix. And you will get the solutions for both of them. And see that you need 22 Swiss DM calculators. Round trip on American Airlines costs $840. You'll rent an RV for $57 a day, and other expenses cost $55 a day. She budgeted $2,500 and wants to stay as long as possible. According to projected budget, what's the maximum length of her stay? Well, we need to find out how much she has to spend on stuff that depends on the day. So the entire 2,500, subtracting the 440 that's required for a round trip. And then you have to divide it by the total daily expenses, which is 55 plus 57. Do that, round down, because she cannot exceed her budget under any circumstance, and you get 14 days. 4. Last summer, Anthony took a 4-day trip from Seminole to Oregon. Total distance was 1,785 miles. Drive time was 27 hours, 30 minutes. And here's a bunch of stats about how far they drove and what speed they drove at. What was the average speed for day 4? So time is equivalent to distance over speed. So basically, we're looking for what what speed will result in a time of 27 hours and 37 minutes and 37 minutes when all the times are combined. So 525 miles at 63 miles per hour, 475 miles at 67 miles per hour. This continues. Then they don't give you how far they traveled on day 4. So you got to figure out how much is remaining on the trip. So the entire trip distance minus each of the 5 values over some unknown speed nets you 57 hours and 37 minutes worth of time spent. And you'll get an X value of 58 miles per hour. Melina left her home and traveled due north for 30 minutes at 26 miles per hour, east for 45 minutes at 24 miles per hour, and south for 75 minutes at 22 miles per hour. How far was she from home? Well, that's just kind of mapped here. So distance is speed times time. So 26 miles per hour times 0.5 hours or 30 minutes. Going north, then you're going east, and then you're going south. Then you're using Pythagorean theorem based on this triangle right here. So this side here is going to be the amount you traveled east, so 0.75 times 24 squared, plus this side right here, which is going to be this entire 1 point distance they traveled south, subtracted by the distance they traveled north. So 1.25 times 22 minus 26 times 0.5. Use Pythagorean theorem on that, and you get a distance of 23.1 miles. Diesel can milk 8 cows in 50 minutes. Zevin can milk 12 cows in 70 minutes. And Diesel begins milking cows at 5 a.m. Zevin arrives at 5:45 a.m. and they work until all 97 cows have been milked. What time is it when they finish? So, because Diesel starts early, let's figure out how many milks or how many cows Diesel milks before Zevin joins him. So he milks 8 cows in 50 minutes, so his rate is 8/50 cows per minute. And then that's multiplied by the 105 minutes he spent milking, and that means he milked 16.8 cows. Now they work together to milk the remaining ones, so subtract the 97 cows by that number, and then multiply it then do the rates multiplied by your unknown time. So 8 cows over 50 minutes times an unknown number of minutes, and then 12 cows over 70 minutes times an unknown number of minutes. Do that, divide by 60 to convert to hours, and then add it to 6:45, and you'll get a time of 10:47 a.m. Consider this function. If g of x is the inverse function of f of x, then g of 1 is what? The definition of an inverse function is basically what value of x results this y here. So in other words, what value of x does this function right here return 1? Just put that in EQ solver and get a value of 2.0. Walt made 176 on test A, 182 on test B, 184 on test C, 186 on test D, and 198 on test E. What score will he need to make on test F to have an overall average of 190? Okay, well, the average of your test scores is going to be the sum of the test scores divided by the number of them. Hopefully you know that by now. So you just add them all together, add it to some unknown x value, divide by 6, and that should be 190. EQ solver for x, and you get 214. Dylan has a small farm west of Brock where he raises farms, hogs, and dogs. Number of frogs is 7 more than 5 times the number of hogs. And they're basically giving you a bunch of equations. Number of hogs is 3 times number of dogs, and 121 total creatures. So these are your two equations. The number of frogs is 7 more than 5 times the number of hogs. Number of hogs is 3 times the number of dogs, and all the creatures total to 121. So we'll be using our RF matrix for this. This will be F, this will be H, and this will be D, or frogs, hogs, and dogs. So 1 frog is equal to 1 frog minus 7 hogs is equal to 7, which is what happens if you move this H over here. And then you do a similar process with this. Number of hogs is equal to 3D. So you got to move the 3D over, and you get H minus 3 dogs times H minus 3 times the number of dogs is equal to 0, as shown here. And then all the creatures add up to 121, as we showed here. Take the RF, that matrix, go to matrix, math, and then scroll up till you see RF, and you'll get 97 frogs. Okay, triangle. What is the area of ABC? Okay, we'll be using our shoelace program for this. So yeah, you'll need to put in all the coords. So for L1, you'll put in the x coordinates, so -8, -2, and 8. Then for L2, you put in the y coordinates, -8, 8, and 2. Yeah, they're pretty similar numbers. And then you use the shoelace program. I guess I never really mentioned it because I figured it was obvious, but size is the number of sides on your triangle, or the size of your list. So it's 3 in this case. The area of ABC is therefore 98.0. You do that. Graph y equals f of x is a perpendicular bisector of AB. F of -21 is what? So perpendicular bisector of AB, you need 2 things to find a perpendicular bisector. You need the bisector and you need the perpendicular slope. So the midpoint basically we need the midpoint. So the midpoint is the average of the x's and average of the y's. So the average x value is -5 and the average y value is 0. -8 minus 2 over 2 gets you 5. And then -8 plus 8 over 2 is equal to 0. So yeah, midpoint, -5, 0. Then you need the slope of AB, which it goes up 16y and then over 6x, so 16 over 6. Now what you do is you perpendicular bisect the slope, or you flip it and make it negative. So -6 over 16, and then you use point slope form. So the midpoint was -5, 0, so x minus -5 or x plus 5, and then plus 0. Well, really, this would be minus. No, it would be plus. Yeah. So yeah, and then you plug in -21 for that, and you get 6.0. Okay, the longest median of ABC is what? We'll be using our triangle special segment program for this. So go to triangle, special segment, and then you'll need to put in all the side lengths. Unfortunately, you'll have to use Pythagorean theorem to figure out all of them, which will take a while. Change in x squared plus change in y squared. So for AB, for instance, it would be 6 square root of 6 squared plus a 16 squared, as shown here. Do that for all the sides, and then then run the program, and the longest median it should give you should have a length of 17.0. Consider triangle DEF with DE is equal to 12, EF is equal to 9, and measurement of DEF is equal to 90. Point G lies on DF such that measurement of EGF is equal to 90 degrees. DG is equal to what? So, I guess I should, yeah, I'll mark the side lengths here. But basically, we covered this on a few of the previous tests, but in this case, this side squared is equal to this, or ED squared is basically equal to DG and times FD in this scenario where there's two right angles like this. So we know this, we can use Pythagorean theorem to figure out that FD is 15, as shown here. So now 12 squared times some value that represents DG times the entire 15, the triangle, will get you 12 squared. Solve for x here and you get 9.6. What is the area of EGF? Well, okay, to do that, we gotta figure out this side right here. Well, we know this side is 9.6, so that this side is 5.4. We can use Pythagorean theorem to get this side of 7.2, because this is a right angle. This squared minus the 5.4 squared. That'll get you the height. Multiply it by your 5.4 again, and divide by 2 because it's a triangle, and you get a value of 19.44 as your area. Consider triangle HIJ with HI is equal to 16, IJ is 25. Measurement of HIJ is 56. Point K lies on HJ such that ray IK bisects, point K here, HIG. If HK is equal to 8.1265, then what is KJ? Well, okay, this is pretty much the same property we mentioned earlier. So I told you why on the previous two videos where this occurred. So I'll spare the explanation now, but basically it's the same thing. 16 over this 8.1265 has to be equal to 25 over this KJ value that we don't know. Follow that proportion, solve for x, and you get 12.7. The area of a regular hexagon is 62.3798. And what is AE? The area of a regular polygon is the side of the polygon squared times the number of sides over 4 over tangent of 180 degrees over the number of sides. That value has what? Oh yeah. Yeah, this is solving for sides gets you the side you get is 4.9. That's technically not true. Side is equal to 4.9. So then once you have your side, or once you've solved for your side, you need to figure out what the interior angle of the triangle is, because this isn't a, we're not looking for AF or EF, we're looking for AE. So basically it's a triangle that's being formed between two sides. So you need to figure out an interior angle so you can figure out what angle you need to use. Interior angle of a polygon is 180 minus 360 over the number of sides, so 120. Now you can use our SAS program to solve for that final side of your triangle, 4.9, 4.9, and your angle of 120 to get a value of 8.5. The total area of a pyramid with a square base is that. The diagonal of the base is 16.55. What is the volume of the pyramid? Well, if the diagonal of a base is that, you can very easily figure out the square side, because as it works, a square, you can use Pythagorean theorem to prove it, but the base of it's an isosceles triangle basically, so you can divide the hypotenuse by square root of 2 to get the side length. So then once you do that, you got the square side length. You know that there are two parts that make up the surface area of a pyramid, which is what they're talking about here. So the area of the square base, so s squared, plus, and then the four triangles that are on the side. Well, to figure out the height of the triangle, you got to use Pythagorean theorem with the with the length and the height to figure out that diagonal height of the triangle or tilted triangle. So that's going to be your side length over 2 squared plus your unknown height squared. And then that's going to be, then because it's a triangle, you're multiplying it by your base, dividing by 2 because it's a triangle, like I said. And since there are 4 triangles, you multiply by 4. And you can get an h value based on that. Then once you do that, you just do s squared and then multiply it by h over 3, because that's the formula for a volume of a pyramid. Do that and you will get a volume of 580. Consider an arithmetic series in which 5 times the third term is equal to the 13th term. If the 8th term is 60, what is the sum of the first 18 terms? Okay, this is a bit of a hard one for me to explain, but I'll do my best. So let's assign the variable start, or what I'm going to call it, as the third term of your equation. That's what this part is based off of. And then rate as the amount the number increases by each term. So to go from the third term to the fourth term, it would increase by rate. So hopefully you can imagine that 5 times the third term is equal to the third term plus 10 times the rate. It increases by the rate 10 times from position or the third term to the 13th term. And also the 8th term is 60. So that means the start at the 3 term plus the rate times 5, because to go from 3 to 8 has to be equal to 60. So we can use a systems of equation for this. So so 5 times the start is equal to start plus 10 times rate. So 4 start minus 10 rate is equal to 0. And then we also do this equation, start plus 5 rate is equal to 60. RF for that, and you'll get a start of 20 and a rate of 8. And then you use a then you go to your calculator and do summation. Summation from 1 to 18 of 20 plus 8, your rate, times x minus 3, so that the third term is indeed 20 like it should be. And if you do that, you'll get a value of 1296. The frequency of a vibrating string fixed at both ends varies directly with the square root of the tension the string is under and inversely with the effective length of the string. String that was initially under a tension of 60 newtons and effective length of 42 centimeters produced 512 hertz. And what will the frequency be with this new data? So because it's directly related to these, basically we have to figure out what k value this is being multiplied by to get the frequency we talked about. So it's directly related to the square root of the tension, so you multiply it by the square root of your 60 newtons tension, and it's inversely related to the length of the string, so you divide it by that 42. So then you use that to figure out your value of k. So your K is 2,776, and then you plug in your new values. 776 times square root of your new tension of 120 divided by your new length of 36. And you get 845 hertz. Ball is dropped from 18 feet. On each bounce, it rebounds 2/3 of the distance it fell. How far does the ball bounce on its 10th fall? Okay, so first off, on the first fall, it's going to fall 18 feet. Then on the second one, it's going to fall 2/3 that much. The third one is going to fall 2/3 times 2/3 the original value. As you can see, the series clearly keeps going. And on the 10th fall, it'll be multiplied by 10 or by 2/3, 9 times basically. So then you multiply that by your original height, and then multiply it by 12 to convert to inches, and you get a value of 5.6. Two different samples of radioactive material are decaying. Sample A has an initial mass of 3.22 grams and a half-life of 96 hours. Sample B has an initial mass of 6.86 and a half-life of 64 hours. Find the time required for the remaining amount of sample A to equal sample B. This is an exponential equation. Half-life means the amount of time it takes for a material to half. So the 3.22 grams decays at a rate of being multiplied by 0.5 every 96 hours, so T over 96. Counteract that. That has to be equal to 6.86 times 0.5 power 2, this should still be T, divided by 64 hours. And if you do that, you'll get a time of 209.5 hours. Jacob left port at 1 p.m. and sailed due east at 18 miles per hour. Benjamin left port at 2 p.m. and sailed at 30 degrees south of west at 15 miles per hour. How far apart were they at 6 p.m.? Well, this is going to be an SAS program. You're able to easily calculate the distance of your two sides and the angle they're traveling at. So they traveled due east at 18 miles for one dude traveled due east at 18 miles for a total of 5 hours. So they went 90 miles. And then Benjamin traveled 30 degrees south of west at 15 miles per hour. So for 4 hours. So 15 times 4. And their angle is going to be calculated kind of like this. You can imagine this is your west and east line. So this is going to be your 30 degrees south of west, which means this other thing must be 150 degrees because they're supplementary angles. So if you do that, you will get a value of 145 miles as your length. 23. The swimming pool at Teresa's house has a pipe that can fill a pool in 72 hours. The rain can empty the pool in 90 hours. And the pool is shaped like a regular pentagon with 24 feet long, constant depth of 4 feet. The pipe was turned on at T equals 0. The drain was open 12 hours later. The pool was finally full at... Well, okay, actually, I made the same mistake the key did. Right, this is the error question. So I'm just going to circle both of them because how it works is that we figure out what time it takes for the, or basically, yeah, why am I stuttering? You got to figure out first off how much does the pool fill before the drain accidentally turns on. So the pipe fills one pool in 72 hours. Multiply that by 12 hours and you get 1/6 of the pool that is full. So then you subtract that from 1 and then you have to, and that's the amount of the pool left to be filled. So then it's filled at a rate of 1 over 72 hours times time and drained at a rate of 1 over 90 hours times time. So you got to figure out when do these two things equal each other. They equal each other at 300 hours, but you actually have to account for the 12 hours because this thing only happens at t equals 12. So in other words, the actual answer is 312, and I'm stupid because I forgot to do that. And the people who made the key forgot to do that too. It's a verified error on the test, not like the calculator one from this year where I don't think it was verified anywhere. 24. When the pool is completely full, how many gallons of water does it hold? Okay, well, we got to figure out the area of your pentagon base and then multiply it by your height. So area of a regular polygon, side squared times number of sides over 4 over tangent of 180 over the number of sides. And if you do that, you will get a value of 991. Then you have to multiply it by your height, 4 to figure out your volume in cubic feet. Then you have to multiply by 12 cubed to convert it to cubic inches, and then divide by 231 to convert cubic inches to gallons. And if you do that, you'll get 29,653 gallons of water. 50 or 25, 39 cis, this is cis by the way, of 150 over 9 cis of 30. Well, how these things work is that you divide the whole numbers as you would expect, 36 over 9, and then you subtract the angles. So 36 over 9 cis of 120 in this case. And if you do that, you just plug in these values or solve for it, and you get -2 plus 2 square root of 3. You can also just literally plug this equation into your calculator as long as you have imaginary numbers enabled, and it'll get you this answer just fine. Grandpa told Michael he'll pay for his first year of graduate school at A&M. The current estimated cost is $29,000, and they anticipate entering graduate school in 4 years. How much will Grandpa need to place an account that earns 6% annual interest compounded monthly? Pay for Michael's first year if the estimated cost does not increase. So we got to figure out what original value needed to be placed in the account. It earns a rate interest at a rate of 0.0 or 6%, so 0.06, and was compounded monthly, which means we need to divide the rate by 12 and multiply the time by 12. That's what compounded multiple times basically means. So yeah, 1 plus 0.06 over 12 power to 12 times your 4 years has to get you this 29,266. And you get an original cost of $23,035. Find the acute angle formed by the two intersecting lines shown on the right. There's an equation for this. If you write your, basically I'm kind of writing a vector here in a way. I'm writing it in standard form, but you can imagine x goes 3 and then 5 goes, or y goes 5 or something like that. At the end of the day, this equation also exists, but basically I wrote the equation in standard terms based on its slope. So its slope is 3 over 5, or positive or negative 3 over 5 of these two lines. So negative 3x plus 5y and 3x plus 5y. And the formula does not care what they're equal to, because you can imagine, even if they're intersecting like over here, the angle is still going to be the same if the slope is the same. So from there, what you do is you take the dot product of the coefficients, so -3 times 3 plus 5 times 5, and then you divide it by the square root of, or the Pythagorean of your coefficients, so square root of 3 squared plus 5 squared, and you do that for both, so you have to square that value as well. And then finally, you take the cosine inverse of that, and you get 61.9 degrees. The two lines are the asymptotes of a hyperbola. The equation of a hyperbola is in the form y minus k, yada yada yada. A and b are integers. Let's just make sure that they can't be interchanged. One of the foci is the point h, k plus c. A plus b plus c is what? Well, since we know that the slope is 3/5, we know that as a result, the change in a has to be equal to 3 and b has to be equal to 5. Because that's basically what the slope asymptotes are based off of. They're based on the a and b that are shown here. So 3 and 5. And then one of the foci. Well, the foci of a hyperbola is equivalent to square root of a squared plus b squared, and then plus the original coordinates, of course. So then your c is going to be, as a result, 3 squared plus 5 squared. You add it to the 5 and 3 you have before, and you get 13.8. If the area of the circle x squared plus y squared minus 12x plus 4y plus f is 0 is equal to 49 pi, then what is f? Okay, what you got to do is you got to bring in this negative 12 and this 4y by bring, and you got to bring it back in. So you can imagine if this was x minus 6 squared was expanded, you'd have x squared minus 12x that you need here, and then an extra 36 that needs to be accounted for. And a similar thing is done for y. Y plus 2 squared would be y squared plus 4y plus 4 that needs to be accounted for. That's kind of how you're taking them back. You're subtracting it by this number over 2 and then squaring it like that. And then that value has to be equal to 49 because this is representing r squared. If your y value was at the center, but your x value was a 7 out, like it should be for a circle with with an area of 49 pi, then this value of 7 will be squared, and it will get you 49. So now you got to figure out what had to happen to account for that. So basically, what you do is bringing this back in adds up 36 on that side, so you have to add a 36 to this 0. You also have to add a 4 to this 0 from this here, because you're technically adding 36 on this side and 4 on this side by doing this. So basically f, or 40 minus f is equal to 49. And from there, you can just see that f is clearly for negative 9. 33 of the zeros of this equation are negative 4, 3, and 1 plus square root of 7. If b, c, d, and h are integers, then f of 4 is what? Well, since they're all integers, that means that the only way to prevent another irrational root, or this is irrational, sorry. The only way to prevent an irrational or irrational coefficients is to kind of cancel out this 1 plus square root of 7. And the only way to do that is to do 1 minus square root of 7 to counteract it. Because if you multiply that stuff, everything that's it kind of cancels each other out. Everything that's a square root of 7 by has a negative square root of 7 being multiplied by as well. So if you do that, the other root must be 1 minus square root of 7. And then you just do 1, or since you're plugging in 4, you can write it in terms of x minus all your roots. That's a valid way to write equations like this. So 4 minus negative 4, 4 times 4 minus 3 times all this stuff continued gets you a value of 16. 31. Russell shoots free throws every day after practice. After 15 minutes, he only made 60%. At that point, Becky came into her room and Russell began to focus. He got on a hot streak and made 40 free throws in a row. This increased his free throw percentage to 70%. How many free throws did he attempt? So first off, we need to figure out how many free throws he made. Well, that's 0.6 times some unknown value of free throws before the 40 in a row. So 0.6 times x plus your 40 in a row has to be equal to the original, and dividing by the total number of free throw attempts, which is just going to be your x plus 40, has to be equal to 0.7. And if you do that, you'll get an x value of 120, but you have to add 42 to count to the 43 throws in a row, and you'll get 160. 32, I don't know why this problem exists. You just put, I guess maybe they think you don't know what this means. It just means h of f of negative 3. So plug in negative 3 for f, and then plug in your result for h, or in h. You get, I didn't even bother to, yeah, I just said plug in. So you get 15 for f of negative 3, and then h of 15 is 9. 33, angle of elevation from mouse on the ground to a hawk was 36 degrees. Then the mouse moved cautiously and reached an elevation of 48. At the height of the building, 120 feet, what rate did the mouse move towards the bank? Well, we know that we can use trigonometric properties to figure out how far the mouse is at both of the times periods. So what you got to do is you're given your opposite. You need to find your adjacent, as shown here. This angle is 36. This angle is 48. So you're looking for cotangent, basically. You need to do, so 1 over tangent of your original angle times 126 will get you this entire side right here. And then to figure out how far they move, you need to subtract it by this side right here. Well, this angle is 48. The height of the building didn't change, so 1 over tangent of 48 times 126, and that will get you a distance of 60. Then once you do that, you divide distance over time to figure out your rate. So 60 feet, uh, 60 feet per second, 60 feet over 80 seconds gets you 0.75 feet. Multiply by 12 to get inches, and you get 9.0 inches. The parabola is concave down with point -3, -2 at a vertex. Point 3, -11 lies on the parabola. If the point -6b also lies on the parabola, then b is equal to what? Well, we're going to be using stat edit and quadratic regression to make our quadratic formula, or our quadratic equation. So they give us 2 points right off the bat. They give you -3 and -2, -3, -2, and 3, -11, but you need to find one more point. Well, you're given that this is the vertex, which means it's a quadratic formula or quadratic equation is always symmetric along the vertex, which means that any number of spaces any value with an x value, a number of spaces to the right of the vertex will have the same y value as one that many spaces left. In other words, the point at 3, -11, or point at x equals 3 has to have the same y value at the point of, or sorry, let me explain it one more time. The point at -3 plus 6 has to have the same y value at the point of as the point of -3 minus 6. In other words, the point -9 and -11 is also on the quadratic. So then you use quadratic regression, store it in y1, and then take y1 of -6. And then you will see that you get a value of -4.25. 35, consider this triangle with these vertices. Find the measurement of BAC. Well, okay. To do that, we gotta use, well, there are multiple ways you can do it. Technically, you can do different things if you want. You can, sorry, what I would do, or what I did in this thing is I changed the coordinates of B and C to make them relative to A. And that'll allow us to use a formula to figure out the angle between two vectors. Alternatively, you can also just use the SSS triangle program and use three-dimensional Pythagorean theorem to figure out all the side length. I'll be going over the one where you use the vector. So what you do is you figure out the distance or the change that has to happen to the point at A to get to your vector's point. So -4 plus 6 will get you the 2. So B's x value is 6. -3 goes down 8 to get to -5. So -8. That continues all the way for both of these points. And if you do that, I mean, did the video not? No, the video didn't cut out on me. I'm good. If you do that, then you do the dot product of this stuff. So 6 times 11 plus -8 times -9 plus -2 times 3. And then you divide it by the Pythagorean of these three vectors. So 6 squared plus 8 squared plus 2 squared. And divide it by, same thing for the C, 11 squared plus 9 squared plus 9. Look for cosine inverse of that, and you'll get an angle of 27 degrees. Find the area of triangle ABC. We can use our shoelace program for this, our 3D shoelace one. Edit all the coordinates, put all the x's in L1, y's in L2, and z's in L3. And you'll get a value of 33.6 when you use the shoelace program. The point in rectangular coordinates A5 is on the polar graph. What is A? Now this is another one where there are multiple ways to do it, but I'll show you the method I do. which is basically to kind of ignore what they want you to do and do my thing. So basically, as I mentioned on the previous test, I believe, taking sine of theta will counteract the r of theta of the polar equation and therefore return you the y value for a given theta. So I looked for what theta will give you 5 based on this equation. And then I just plugged it in to figure out r of theta and then multiply it by cosine to counteract the polar equation and convert it back to an x. And if you do that, you get a value of 2.4. You can also just convert sine of 2 theta to 2 sine cosine sine of theta, and then you do that to go to 2xy over r squared. 2xy is equal to 24. I mean, like, you can do that if you want, but I like to do it my way because I don't want to think about that stuff. 38. Consider the unit circle with an angle theta in quadrant 3 such that cosine of theta is equal to negative 0.5 and angle alpha also in quadrant 3 such that sine of alpha is negative 0.5 as well. Cosine of theta minus alpha is what? Well, we'll be doing like I said, you can use subtracting angles on cosine or whatever, or you can just brute force it like I like to do. So first off, we need to figure out what degree will get you cosine inverse of, or will get you a value of negative 0.5. Why did I get rid of that? So that will get you some cosine inverse of negative 0.5 will get you a value like, let me just figure it out. It should get you 120 degrees. Then once you have that, you need to find the equivalent in quadrant 3. Well, cosine right now is, or basically the circle that's formed is looking like this, and cosine represents the x. So as you can see, if you look for the opposite side, so this is 60 degrees less than 180 degrees, and if you add that 60 degrees back, you'll get the same x value. So that boils down to an equation of 360 minus cosine inverse of that, and you'll get an angle of 240 degrees. Then you do a similar thing for sine. You get sine of negative 0.5, and for the sine inverse, they return a negative value. So, and then like the similar property, the equation of your circle to go from quadrant 3 to quadrant 4 looks like this. So it's equidistant from 270 degrees to your 2 points that you're looking for, the one sine inverse gives you and the one you actually have. That boils down to this equation right here, 180 minus a sine inverse of negative 0.5. So then you do that, you do cosine of theta minus alpha, and you get square root of 3 over 2. Consider this conic. The graph of the conic is what? Okay, we get to talk a bit more about this xy thing since this is normally an ellipse. So what we need to do is, basically we need to figure out is if you can imagine this as an x plus y squared kind of thing. So what we need to do is if we had 5x squared, for example, to make it back into this, we would do square root of 5. And then the similar thing would be done for y. So this will get you 5x squared plus 3y squared that we need here. So what we need to figure out is this xy that's going to be formed from this less than the xy that's given? And if so, it can't be represented by this, and it is therefore not an ellipse. However, in this case, well, this boils down to multiplying it 2 times square root of 5 times square root of 3. However, the xy given is indeed less than that value, so it is indeed an ellipse. It can be, maybe it was a little confusing to explain, but yeah, just try and understand this right here. This is your bound you're looking for. Square root of this plus square root of that squared, so what would be formed by the xy of that? It should not exceed that, unless if it does, it becomes a hyperbola, or if it's equal to that, it becomes two parallel lines. The angle of the rotation of the graph is what? Angle of rotation formula, 1 over tangent of 2 theta is equal to this x coefficient minus y coefficient over xy coefficient. Do that, you get a value of 31.7. 41, the slope of the line tangent to the graph of f of x at x equals -2 is what? You'll want to stat edit both graphs, put in the coordinates for all of them, then use quadratic and linear regression, sort in y1 and y2 to solve a bunch of these problems. Then the first one, pretty easy. Take the derivative of f of x at -2, and you get a value of -2.0. Or sorry, 2.0. Now we can use our, now here are where the Oxor programs come in, or results come in handy. So we'll be using our Oxor program for a lot of these problems. So Oxor, it'll be able to find the points of intersection just fine. And then your line of revolution, if you look all the way down here onto 43, is -8. So -8 is your line of revolution. And that will get you the area of your graph and the volume of your solid of revolution of 28.6 and 1,760 respectively. Then what is the arc length of your equation? Arc length of a, what do you even call it, function? Yeah, calculator calls it function, is the integral from your two bounds of the square root of 1 plus the derivative of your function squared. And this is done, the derivative is done before squaring, by the way. So if you do that, and you will get a value of 12.76. Given dy over dx is equal to this thing, y is equal to 0, use Euler's approximation method. You should now immediately know you need to put this equation into y1 and use our approximation program for Euler. And then you can use the data they give you. They step size of 0.1 and they're going to 0.2, so there's 2 steps. Your x start is 0 and your y start is 1, and you need to get to 0.2. Do that and you'll get a value of 1.390. 46, if f of x is the integral from 0 to 3x of cosine of 2x dt, what is f prime of 2? This is the fundamental theorem of calculus, which states that doing this involves the integral cancels out, and then you plug in this 3x in place of t, and then you multiply it by the derivative of 3x. So in other words, it cancels out to this equation right here, 3 times cosine of 6x dx. Plug in 2 to that and get a value of 2.53. The average value of f of x, this another giant equation, you're just going to put into y1. So what you do is average value is equal to the area under the curve divided by the length of the curve. That will get you the average height, as you might be able to understand. So you need integral from 0 to 12 of this equation, and then you divide it by your length of 12, your integral length of 12, and you get an average value of -0.355. 48. Suppose that the quail population was essentially 0 in 2019, and they released 100 quail in 2020. Population reached 180 quail 3 years later, and they don't think the population can sustain more than 500. This is going to be a logistic equation because it said it can't sustain any more, and it also increases. Really, if you're just seeing something about them introducing a new species, it's almost always logistic. So basically, you'll go to your diffeq program, then go to logistic, then you'll know the time based on this stuff right here. You're figuring out what the number of quails is at a certain time, so you know your time. Your initial is going to be 100 quails. Your first time is going to be 3 years after their release, so 3. Your first pop is your 180 at that point, and then your maximum is 500, and your final time is going to be the 20 years later that this model represents. And if you do that, you'll get 900 or 491 quails predicted, and a rate of maximum rate of increase shown at negative or at 34. So find 50, find the interval of convergence of this equation. What we need to do is we need to make sure that this x plus 2 powered n does not overpower the 3 powered n. Otherwise, it will not converge. In other words, x plus 2, the absolute value of x plus 2 has to be less than or sometimes equal to 3. So your bound is negative 5 to 1. That immediately eliminates 1, or A, C, and E. So now you need to figure out if it can be equal to that value. Well, for that to be the case, there has to be something on the bottom that makes it get smaller, and it has to alternate. However, there's nothing at the bottom making each n value become exponentially smaller, or not exponential. It doesn't even have to be exponentially. It just has to get smaller. So as a result, it cannot be equal to that 3. Otherwise, it will not converge. So negative 5 to 1, open parentheses like this will be your answer. If they could be equal to that, then you do the square brackets here. 51, the continuous function f is shown on the right. Let h be the integral from negative 10 to x of f of t. What is h of 10? Well, you just need the integral. That's just the integral from negative 10 to 10 of your equation. So this is a semicircle. So 4 squared times pi over 2. And this is a triangle with a height of 12 and a length of 12. So 12 times 12 over 2. Add those together and you get a value of 97. H is concave down over the interval a to b. A plus b is what? This graph shown is the derivative of h, and concavity is based on the second derivative. So the derivative of f of x is equal to second derivative of h of x, f. It's concave down whenever that value is equal to or is less than 0. In other words, when is the slope of this graph 0, which happens from the point negative 6 to negative 2. Negative 6 minus 2 is equal to negative 8. 53. The OAE reported in January that the mean SAT score for the 2024 seniors at Mac High was 980, standard deviation of 120. March, the OEA said an error was found, and they corrected the scores by adding 20 and then multiplying by 1.1. If Pistol's corrected score was 1280, what percentile is she in? Well, let's figure out Pistol's original score and then do things that way because that's easier. So at the end, it was multiplied by 1.1, so counteract that by dividing by 1.1 now. And then she had 20 points added, so subtract from 20, and you get that she had an original score of 1,143 point stuff that probably isn't going to change the answer. Then you can use normal CDF. This is a normal function, so distribute and then normal CDF. Your lower is negative infinity, basically. Your higher is your 1143.626. And then you have your mean, 980, and your standard deviation of 120 that was given to you. And you get a percentile of 91, or 0.91. Assume the mean heights of the trees in the California Redwoods National Park is 380 feet, standard deviation of 20 feet. What proportion of trees are over 400 feet tall? Easy enough. This is just another normal CDF problem. Has to be 600 or greater. Lower bound is 400. Or it has to be 400 or greater, so lower bound is 400. Upper bound is infinity. Your mean is 280. Your standard deviation is 20. You get a value of proportion of 0.16. A group of 12 trees is randomly selected. Find the probability that at least 4 will be taller than 400 feet. Well, we know the probability that they will be, so we need the probability that there are at least 4 trees taller is 1 minus the probability that there are 3 or less trees taller than that. So we can use binomial CDF for that. There are 12 trials being run, or 12 trees randomly selected. The probability of it being taller is what we got earlier. And we're looking for 3 or less, so you put 3. Do that, and then subtract 1 from that, and you get a value of 0.11 as your probability. 56. Are students at A&M more fit than UT? Random sample 180 students at A&M found 122 exercise regularly, and a random sample of 200 found that 114 exercise regularly. Construct a 96% confidence interval. Okay, we can use this is a, a T or a sorry a two prop interval if I've ever seen one. There are two groups, and you're looking, and they're based on proportions. What percent of them exercise regularly? So you'll go to stat test, and then two prop z interval. You have to scroll down a bit to find it. Then you plug in all your values. Your x is going to be the amount that exercise regularly, and your n is going to be the total number of people surveyed. Your confidence level is going to be expressed as a decimal. And if you do that, you'll get a value of point. You'll get something of 0.0064 and 0.2092. Suppose 62% of adult men over 40 are overweight. Of these, 36% are in exercise program. Of those who are not overweight, 44% are on exercise program. If an adult man over 40 is on an exercise program, what's the probability he is overweight? Okay, so the probability of something given another thing is equal to the probability of that event over that probability. Actually, I don't know if that's really what. Yeah, basic basically probability of A given B is equal to probability of A over probability of B. So probability that a man is overweight and on an exercise program is 0.62 times 0.36. And the probability that he is over or that he is on an exercise program period is equal to that 0.62 times 0.36 mentioned earlier, but also the 0.38% of people that aren't overweight times the 0.4 times the 44% of people who are on the exercise program anyway. And if you do that, you'll get a probability of 0.57. 58, Randy and Thomas are retired buddies who play golf together 3 days a week. Distribution of Randy's drives off the tee is approximately normal, mean of 260, standard deviation of 8 yards. Tommy's drives are also normal, mean of 280 and standard deviation of 12. What's the probability Randy does the unexpected and drives the ball farther than Tommy on a randomly selected golf course? So we're looking for any time Randy does more, so more than 0, basically, between their differences. So it can be as much farther as they want. And Randy is expected to hit it 20 yards less, so your mean is negative 20. Your standard deviation given is equal to the Pythagorean or of your two standard deviations. So that's how that stuff is calculated. So your standard deviation of the differences between their drives is equal to the 12 squared of Tommy's and then the 8 squared of Randy's. And that'll be your standard deviation, and you'll get a value of 0.08 as your probability. Okay, you're given a bunch of tests, number of tests they've taken, and a bunch of meet scores. They calculate a least squares regression line or a linear regression for this data. What is the residual of a student who takes 12 practice tests? Well, in this case, you'll have to stat edit all this stuff and then use linear regression, store the regression in Y1, and you'll have your line of prediction. So your residual is going to be your estimate minus your actual. So if you do that, you put in Y12, you subtract 176, and you get 2.2. And 60 is done similarly. You just put in Y of 30, and you get an estimate of a score of 297, which would be very impressive on a number sense test. All right, that's the entire test. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions or want any more in-depth explanations, leave a comment or ask me in person. See you on the next two tests, which are much, much harder.